Ever get that feeling like you're watching a movie and the hero is about to do something incredible and you just have to hold your breath? Like you're right there with them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I know that feeling.
So what if I told you our brains might actually have a system for that? For like stepping into other people's shoes, not just, emotionally, but like at a neural level.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Well, that is exactly what we are diving into today, my friend, mirror neurons.
Which, gotta say, it does sound a little sci-fi, right? But this is real deal brain science.
Oh, it's the real deal, and we are going deep. We're talking a 1998 research paper, Mirror Neurons and the Simulation Theory of Mind Reading.
Ah, classic paper. And it really gets at the heart of how we understand each other, maybe even more than we realize.
Right, so this paper, it landed on my desk, and I gotta be honest, it was dense. But once you get past all the scientific jargon, there are some serious aha moments in there.
Oh, for sure. And it all starts, believe it or not, with research on macaque monkeys.
Monkeys. Okay, tell me more.
So these scientists, they were studying an area in the monkey's brain that's responsible for movement, right? Planning and executing movements, called the premotor cortex.
Okay, the premotor cortex, got it. And
And they found something they really didn't expect.
okay, now I'm really curious. What is it?
So picture this. They're watching these monkeys, and they notice that a certain group of neurons, they fire not just when the monkey does something, but when it watches another monkey do something.
Wait, so let me get this straight. The monkey sees another monkey grab, say, a banana, and its brain is like, hey, I could do that too.
Basically, it's like a neural echo. And they called these special cells mirror neurons because they seem to mirror the actions the monkey was seeing.
A mirror in the brain. Okay, I like it. But hold on, it's not just that the monkey sees a hand move and thinks, oh, a hand is moving. It's like their brain is running a simulation of the action itself.
Exactly. And there's this other really important detail. These mirror neurons, they're picky.
Picky neurons. All right, I'm intrigued. How so?
They don't fire for just any old action. It has to have a purpose and intention behind it.
So, like, if I'm watching someone reach for a doorknob, my mirror neurons are firing away. But if
Yep.
they're just, like, waving their hand around, nothing.
You got it. It's not the movement itself. It's about understanding the goal.
Hmm.
And that is where things get really interesting when we're talking about, like, how we read each other.
How we read each other. So how does this whole intention recognition thing work? Do we have some secret decoder ring for other people's thoughts or what?
Well, the paper talks about two main theories. The first one is called the theory. And it's kind of like, yeah, a mental rule book.
A rule book. Okay, so like if a person smiles, they must be happy. Or if they reach for the cookie jar, they're probably thinking about cookies.
Precisely. We learn those rules as we go and use them to figure out what's going on. But then there's the other theory, the simulation theory. And that's where our friend the mirror neuron really comes into play.
Okay, now I'm hooked. Simulation theory, hit me.
So instead of just relying on this rule book, it suggests that we understand others by mentally simulating their actions in our own brains.
So less about decoding, more about experiencing.
Exactly. Like our brains have this shortcut to understanding each other from the inside out.
So if we're basically mini-simulating everyone around us all the time, how did researchers actually figure that out? We can't just, like, teleport into someone's brain, right?
No, no teleportation yet, unfortunately. But they did do some very clever experiments, both with monkeys and humans.
Okay, this is where it gets really good. Tell me more.
Well, at the time of this paper, they couldn't see individual mirror neurons firing in humans, but they could measure brain activity in other ways. One technique they used is called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. So TMS, it's like, imagine holding this powerful magnet over a specific part of the brain. It's not like moving things around or anything, but it sends a little pulse of energy just to see how that area responds.
Okay, so they're basically, what, tweaking the brain, like it's a dial.
Kinda, yeah. You're getting the idea. And with TMS, they found something really cool. They used it to measure the activity in people's hand muscles while they were watching someone else do this simple grasping action.
So let me guess, just watching someone else grab something made their own hand muscles, like, twitch.
Not twitch exactly, but you're close.
Mm-hmm.
They showed increased excitability, which basically means they were primed for action, ready to go.
Whoa, so even though they were just sitting there watching, their brains were getting ready to, like, mirror the action. That's wild.
Exactly. And here's the real clincher. This only happened when they were watching a real intentional action, like reaching for a cup or something, not just a random hand movement.
Okay, so our brains are definitely onto something here. But what about those monkeys with the electrodes? Did they ever actually see those mirror neurons light up?
So at the time of this paper, they couldn't see individual mirror neurons firing in humans. But they were able to use brain imaging techniques to get a glimpse.
Right, like PET scans instead of magnets.
Exactly. With P scans, they inject a tracer, which is kind of like a radioactive glow stick, but for the brain. And it lets them see which areas are using more energy, indicating more activity.
Okay, makes sense. So what they see when people were watching actions, was there a big flashing mirror neuron zone?
It wasn't quite that obvious, but the PET scans did show a really interesting pattern. Several areas lit up, including that premotor cortex we talked about, but also parts of the brain involved in visual processing, spatial awareness. And get this, a part of the brain called Broca's area.
Hold on, Broca's area, that's the language part of the
Yeah.
brain, right? What do mirror neurons have to do with language?
$1 million question. And honestly, it's one of the most exciting parts of this whole thing. Because the fact that Broca's area, the language area, was active while people were just watching actions. Well, it suggests a potential link between our motor systems, our social understanding, and our ability to use language.
So are you saying that understanding actions, even without words, could have been like a stepping stone to humans developing language?
It's a really compelling theory. Imagine our ancestors, right? Long before spoken language, they're communicating through gestures, facial expressions, and mirror neurons by letting them understand the intention behind those actions. It could have been what allowed for more complex communication to evolve.
Wow. Okay, now my brain is really doing backflips. But this all makes me think, if we're basically mirroring and simulating everything, how do we ever stop ourselves from just, like, copying everything we see? I'm all for understanding people, but I don't want to be a walking echo of everyone around me, you know?
That's a great point.
Hmm.
And it actually brings us to this really interesting thing the paper talks about, imitation behavior. Specifically what happens when it goes a little haywire. They discuss these patients who have damage to a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex, right, and that part of
This-
the brain is involved in.
Planning, decision-making, inhibiting impulses.
Ah, okay. So what happens when that part of the brain isn't working right? Do they just start copying everyone like a mime at a party?
Well, not quite that extreme, but it is called compulsive imitation behavior. They have this urge to copy gestures, actions they see other people doing, and they can't really help it.
So it's like their internal simulator is stuck on play. They can't help but act out what they see.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And as strange as this might sound, it actually supports the simulation theory because it shows that even in healthy brains, when we see an action, there's this initial impulse to mirror it. But our prefrontal cortex is like, hold on, not so fast. Think before you act.
Okay, so our brains are basically running these social simulations all the time in the background to help us understand each other. That's pretty amazing. But we've mainly been talking about monkeys and humans. What about other animals? Do they have mirror neurons too?
That is the question, isn't it? While this paper mostly focuses on primates, it does touch on mind reading in other species, specifically our closest primate relatives, chimpanzees.
Okay, so do chimps have a theory of mind? Can they really put themselves in another chimp's shoes?
That is a question that has caused a lot of debate, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Some researchers will point to deceptive behavior in chimps, like when they hide food, as a sign that they do understand what others can see.
So it's not just about the food itself, it's about what they think the other chimp knows.
Right, like they have at least a basic understanding of another chimp's perspective. But there are other researchers. They argue that this kind of behavior could be explained in much simpler ways, without needing a whole theory of mind.
So the jury is still out on whether chimps are actually mind readers. But even the possibility that they understand some basic intentions and goals, that's fascinating.
Absolutely. And this is where the idea of cognitive continuity comes in. It's like
Yeah.
instead of this sharp line between species, there's this more gradual progression of cognitive abilities. So even if chimps don't have the same level of mind reading as humans, they might still have this basic capacity for understanding goals, intentions behind actions, maybe thanks to those mirror neurons.
So we've gone from these like specialized cells in a monkey's brain to the very nature of how we understand each other, maybe even how language got started. It's like these mirror neurons did this bridge between what's going on in my head and what's going on in your head and how we make sense of the world together.
It really is remarkable, isn't it? This feeling of connection and how much of it might be happening at this deep neural level without us even realizing it.
It's mind-blowing. But this paper, it is from 1998, right? That's a quarter century ago. What are some of the big questions about mirror neurons that scientists are still trying to figure out?
Oh, yeah. You're right. This whole field is constantly evolving. And while this paper was really groundbreaking, a lot of the questions it raised are still being debated today. Like one of the big ones is nature versus nurture. Are we born with these mirror neurons pre-programmed for empathy and connection? Or are they something that gets shaped by our experiences, especially early in life?
It makes me think about how babies are just soaking everything up, especially in those first few years. Like, are those the make or break years for our mirror neuron systems?
It's a huge question.
Mm.
And it makes you think about how all those social interactions, the good and the bad, they could have a lasting impact on our ability to connect with others.
And what about the language piece? Like, mirror neurons are about understanding actions, but the idea that they could be tied to something as complex as language, that's
No.
just wild.
Right. Researchers are still figuring out exactly how it all works. But some believe that our earliest experiences, like imitating gestures and sounds, that could be the foundation, the building blocks for language to develop. All those baby babbles, those silly faces we make at each other, maybe they're more important than we realize.
Wow. Okay, so much to think about. Makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden in our brains, just waiting for scientists to unlock them.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the more we learn about mirror neurons, the more we realize just how essential they are to, well, being human. They shape how we learn, how we connect, how we experience the world around us.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've gone from monkey brains to the mysteries of human connection, all thanks to these tiny cells called mirror neurons. It just goes to show we are wired for empathy, for shared experiences, and for connecting with the world around us. Thanks for joining us on this incredible exploration, and until next time, keep those mirror neurons firing.